I think Khushi, will you be able to share the screen, because I'm not able to share the screen here. Only meeting organizers or presenters can share this.
Just a minute, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah.
Ma'am, can you please try it again?
Yeah, now I can share.
Okay.
Is it visible, everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. So today's topic of discussion will be patient education material. So as we know that medical writing is a very emerging field, and it is a powerful tool. It has become a powerful tool recently, and it is an umbrella term. There are a lot of wings under this medical writing. You can be a regulatory writer, you can be a medical communicator, you can be a scientific writer, you can be a healthcare content writer who is responsible for writing patient education materials. So all these avenues have got different roles to play. So today we are going to focus mainly on patient education materials. So just at a glance, we will look into the learning objectives from today's session. We will learn what medical writing is, what it is, and what are the major types of medical writing. So our focus will be on patient education materials. We will learn about the formats and anatomy. By anatomy, I mean how a patient education material will be structured, what are the different types of patient education materials, and how will you write a structured patient education material. The design that works, like layout principles for easy to read materials, because the name itself is suggestive of a lot of things. Because as I say, patient education material, it has to connect with the patient also. So designing the work, designing your article or whatever you write, that is equally important, along with the content that you provide in your article. Now, writing that works, how will you understand that yes, this is the writing that needs that can be published, or that really can connect with people. So the writing that actually works, the 7 C's, or what are the principles, 7 C principles, that helps you to increase your writing readability of your writing. And we will also see some examples, before and after results, how we can change the writing so that it is well connected with the patient. So to begin with, we just rush through the definition of medical writing. So according to AMWA, American Medical Writers Association, medical writers, they gather, evaluate, organize, interpret, and present information about medicine and health in a form appropriate for a target audience. Now, as I said, medical writing is an umbrella term. Under it falls regulatory writing, scientific writing, manuscript writing, which comes under scientific writing only, healthcare content writing, then grant writing. So medical writing is an umbrella term, and with every forms of medical writing has got a target audience, because you're not writing a regulatory write up for a patient, common layman, or for a patient. Again, if you're writing a healthcare content, then you're not writing it for the regulatory bodies. So every form of medical writing has got the appropriate set of target audience. So in short, a medical writer is a translator. They take dense clinical trial data, drug mechanisms, clinical guidelines, and turn it into content the right reader can use: a regulator, a physician, or a patient. So every medical writer's work relies on three main skill areas. The first and the foremost is ethical standards. Ethical standards, you have to follow strict rules for fairness, accuracy, and compliance. The the job of a medical writing comes with a lot of responsibility. You just cannot write anything and present it. You have to be accurate, you have to be fair, and you have to comply with the guidelines. If it is a regulatory writer, you have to come. If a person is a regulatory writer, that person has to comply with the guidelines of US FDA, EMA, and CDSCO. So these ethical standards really forms the basis of a medical writer's skill. Healthcare knowledge, solid understanding of medical terminology and science. You need to understand the medical terminology. You need to distinguish between the terms. You need to understand them in order to present them in your article. Communication expertise. You have to adapt your tone, depth, and structure to the reader. For a regulatory body, you're not going to write it in a layman language, right? Again, for a patient, you're not going to write it above the standard. So you have to adapt your tone based on your audience. Whatever your target audience is, based on your target audience, your communication should also adapt. You should understand the depth, you should understand the structure, and everything should go on and on. Also, reading, writing, and editing skills also should come hand to hand with all these other skills. So, communication expertise, healthcare knowledge, and ethical standards, uh, all these are the qualities rather that a medical writer should possess. Now, we come to the many phases of medical writing. So, as I told you, it is an umbrella term. There are different branches of medical writing. It is not about patient education material or a regulatory writing. There are different branches of medical writing, and each branch has got its own target audience. Regulatory writing, to begin with, it focuses on drafting highly technical documents which are required by governing bodies, agencies like US FDA, EMA, to get drugs, biologics, and medical devices approved. Common documents under regulatory writing includes clinical trial protocols, investigators' brochures, and clinical study reports. Then comes the scientific and journal writing. It involves writing peer reviewed journal articles, abstracts, posters, and slide presentations for medical conferences. Then comes continuing medical education, CME, education materials that will keep the clinicians or the healthcare professionals updated on the current clinical evidence and the practices. So whatever comes up, whatever new methods or new techniques, new procedures, new treatment options, whatever comes up, so it is through these medical articles that we try to keep the physicians or the professionals updated through CME. Promotional or marketing, it creates content aimed at marketing drugs or medical devices to consumers and professionals, such as product monographs, sales training manuals, and web copy. Grant and scientific proposal writing, it involves drafting competitive research proposals to secure funding from governments, foundations, or private institutions. And finally, last but not the least, is health communication, and patient education material sits at the heart of health communication. What it means translating complex medical jargon into simple, accessible language for lay people, which is our focus for the day. So, whatever we have, we will try to whatever complex medical whatever complex information we have, we always try to make it accessible to the people in a language that they understand, that they can relate. Because, for example, if we see a person who is detected with type 2 diabetes mellitus, okay, if a person is detected with type 2 diabetes mellitus, for example, that person is very anxious because that person is detected type 2 diabetes mellitus for the first time. So what he does, the first thing he does is Google search what type 2 diabetes mellitus is. After a thorough Google search, after reading different articles, the person then visits the doctor. Then the doctor gives a clear description or a clear idea about what this type 2 diabetes mellitus is. Now, the person, when he comes back, he has the knowledge that what is type 2 diabetes mellitus, and this knowledge of him is making him or allowing him to take informed decisions about what he's going to take in his diet, how he is going to modify his lifestyle, and what he's going to do to keep himself fit or to, to reduce the level of sugar in his blood. So that is the purpose of patient education material, because if the patient is allowed, or if the patient is able to relate, then that actually works. So let's focus on patient education materials. What exactly it is? A patient education material is any print, digital, or audiovisual resource which is created to help a patient or caregiver understand a health condition, treatment, or self-care action, and to act on it correctly. So patient education materials also cover answers to common patient questions about those topics, medications, and treatments. What falls under patient education material? We have discharge instructions. It is a highly customized patient education material. Discharge instructions consists of leaflets and brochures, videos and animations, videos showing procedures, self-care, apps and patient portals, which gives you reminders and trackers, facts sheets and FAQs, frequently asked questions, condition specific. All these are examples of patient education material which keeps a patient updated. Now, what is the purpose of a patient education material? Why is this required when we have different other articles? Why there is a different article exclusively for the patients? Patient education is exactly how it sounds. It is the material which is for educating your patients, the people with the condition or disease or symptom, their families, caregivers, and friends about a health topic. Now, the good news is you can work with this type of explainer material with using a logical flow or a logical formula when you're writing it. So whenever you're writing a patient education material, you can apply a logical formula. A logical formula can help you understand that, understand or write a patient education material better, and that also helps to helps your article to people can relate with your article. So in the process of writing, you should also consider about the language, the heavy medical jargons which is used in other papers, like for regulatory writing or for CMEs. If heavy medical jargons are used, those medical jargons should be avoided in a patient education material. The structure, medical editing, everything we have to keep in mind in order to furnish a properly structured patient education material. Now, what is the core job of a patient education material? The core job is to explain the diagnosis or procedure. If a person is suffering from some kind of ailment or illness or some kind of disease, so the purpose of the patient education material would be to explain the diagnosis or procedure, guide you with the correct self-care and medication use, set expectations and reduce anxiety, support shared decision making. So after make a shared decision making, you can set your expectations. Like, yes, suppose you're suffering from NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. You know that there is no such medication for NAFLD. It is just lifestyle modification that helps you to reverse the condition. So after reading an article through different various sites, you have come to the conclusion that yes, it is possible to reverse NAFLD if I can change my lifestyle, or if I can modify my lifestyle. So this sets an expectation, and this reduces your anxiety that yes, it is a reversible condition. So now that why patient education material matters. Now the health literacy gap is real. At least 9 in 10 adults struggle to use everyday health information, even people with strong general literacy. So, someone who is literate but still struggles to understand the medical terminologies. So, it is for them. So, patient education material is to bridge the gap between the health literacy and the common people or the layman. 36% of US adults have only basic or below basic health literacy, according to National Assessment of Adult Literacy. So, a perfect patient education material should be of class 7 to 8 standard reading material. So, 7 to 8 standard reading material is the perfect for any kind of patient education material. Now, if a patient education material is written in a language that is absolutely not understandable by the patients, then there is measurable downstream effects. So when patients don't understand their patient education material, the downstream effects can be measurable. And to name a few, we have medication errors. People can miss doses or there can be incorrect dosing of medication. There can be non-adherence to the treatment plans and follow-ups. Since they do not understand what is written and what to do, they do not adhere to the treatment plans or to the follow-ups. There is poorer outcomes, more readmission, emergency visits, lower trust and engagement. Now, patient education material, it creates significant friction of, if there is low trust and engagement, it will create friction or misunderstanding and a breakdown of trust between the healthcare team and the patient. So in order to bridge the gap, this health literacy gap, so patient education material should be written in class 7 to 8 standard, so that at least all adults struggling to read health information can access that, and there can be less of measurable downstream effects. Now we come to the different types of PEMs, or the different types of patient education materials. The patient education materials can take various forms, such as brochures and pamphlets. They are broad condition overviews, okay, brochures and pamphlets, fact sheets and FAQs. They're quick, highly focused answers that are targeted towards one specific disease state, symptoms or medication, answers on one topic or medicine. Discharge instructions, they're highly customized ones. They're highly customized in the sense each patient has got different discharge instructions. So step-by-step self-care protocols are given directly after an inpatient stay or an emergency room visit or a surgical procedure. Then decision aids, evidence-based tools designed to compare multiple treatment interventions and actively support shared decision making. There are videos and animations, visual demonstration of specific clinical procedures, anatomical concepts, or medical device operations. Apps and patient portals. There are different interactive patient apps, highly personalized ones, and always on digital content and ecosystems. Posters and infographics. This gives a visual effect. Posters and infographics, they are very high impact, at a glance visual displays. They are placed strategically in exam rooms and community spaces. So infographics, they will give you an idea at a glance. So you just have a look at the infographic and you get an idea what it is about to say. Last but not the least comes booklets and guides. It is a comprehensive multi-page in-depth resources which is tailored for long-term chronic disease self-management. So these are the different types of patient education materials that are available. Each type has got its own specifications. Each type has got its own importance, and these patient education materials helps patient at one point or the other to actually relate with the healthcare, to bridge the gap between the healthcare literacy and to know and more about the healthcare or about a particular condition or a disease that they're suffering from, and they bridge the gap. Now, structure of a patient education material, anatomy of a well-built PEM. Now, when I say anatomy, I mean the structural build-up of a patient education material. Now, what should you include in a patient education material? What will make it more engaging? And how will you structure a patient education material? Yes, yes. Is there any issue?
No, ma'am, you
Hello.
can continue.
Okay. I believe the internet is not giving any trouble, right? It is audible and it is no more, there are no more technical glitches.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, this structure of a patient education material. A clear title is very important. The title has to be catchy. It states the topic in plain terms so that the patients should know instantly if this is for them. A patient, when looking into a patient education material, reads the title first. So, from the title, the patient must understand that yes, this article is for me. A one line purpose statement, it will tell the readers what they will learn and why it matters to them. What is the basis of this article? What this article is going to describe them. That is very important. A body in short, headed chunks. Break content into small sections with descriptive headers, not walls of text. There should not be walls of text, too long texts. There should be body in short, headed chunks. There should be supporting visuals. There should be diagrams, icons, or photos placed next to the text they illustrate. So every uh, text, not every text should contain. Contain the diagram, but there are certain text which can be supported with diagrams or which can be supported with icons or photos. So supporting visuals are always welcome in any kind of patient education material. Clear action steps: what to do in order, dosing, warning signs, and when to call for help. So that has to be in order. What will be the dosing of the medication? What are the warning signs, or what to do in case of any kind of emergencies? Then summary and resources. A short recap plus the contact details, the references, and where to learn more from. So from where have you collected the information? Now, design principles. Design carries as much meaning as words. Now, what do I mean by design? You will not literally start drawing on a patient education material, but then design means how are you presenting it? The format. How are you formatting your patient education material? What should be the minimum requirement for a formatting your patient education material? So design carries as much meaning as your words. You're writing multiple things, you're pouring down the content in one article, but then the design is not up to the mark, the structure is not up to the mark, so your engagement will be absolutely zero. The person will not feel like going through the article. So design for a particular, what particular design that we follow, or what particular design that needs to be followed, is a legible type. Use at least a 12 point or 14 point font, and do not use all caps. There should be generous white space, margins, and line spacing that let the eye rest. Crowded pages feel harder to read. So if the page is too much crowded with a lot of information and there is no proper segregation of uh, information, then it will get difficult for the patients to relate and also to read. So generous white spacing is equally important. Left aligned chunked text, short paragraphs under clear headers. Readers scan, they don't study. So if your heading is there, every short paragraph has got a bold heading. So readers will definitely just scan the headings, and maybe if a particular heading interests them, they'll stop and read the article also. So there should be short paragraphs under clear headers. Readers scan, they don't study. High contrast, dark text on a light background, or vice versa, and never light on light. Both cannot be, the text cannot be light and the background also cannot be light at the same time. So there should be a contrast, high contrast. Visuals beside relevant text. You can place each image or icon next to the exact line it supports. And consistent visual hierarchy. Same style for all headers, same style for all action steps. So whatever headers, whatever font or whatever, if you're italicizing them, or if you're you're bolding them. So whatever font you're using, you will use it consistently throughout your article. Throughout, it should be consistent throughout the visual hierarchy should be consistent. So this is the design which matters a lot along with your content. So 7 checks. How will you check that is if your article is publication ready or not? There are 7 checks before you publish your article. The first and the foremost is the 7 C's rather. Clear. It has to be clear. There should be one idea per sentence and the reader shouldn't have to guess your point. So one sentence, one idea. And the sentence cannot be long than 20 words. So there should be one sentence that should convey one idea and the reader should not have to guess your points. Now, next is concise. C for concise. Say it in the fewest words possible without losing the essential meaning. Do not oversimplify them. Do not dilute the meaning of the particular thing. Again, do not write heavy words and make it too long and boring. So avoid unnecessary medical jargon or filler phrases. Concrete, specific instructions and numbers, not vague advice like take as needed. So specific instructions, it should be concrete. Take as needed is very vague. Take twice daily. Okay. This gives you a specific instruction. So it has to be concrete. Give numbers and do not give any vague advices like take as needed. It has to be correct. Ensure all clinical statements align perfectly with current up-to-date medical guidelines. It has to be coherent. Ideas should flow in a logical order so that the reader can follow from the beginning to the end till the end. It should guide the reader logically from the initial symptom to the final self-care action. So if you're writing about a disease condition, suppose heart attack, if you're writing about heart attack, so the first thing that you're going to begin with is an overview. You're going to write a short overview of heart attack. Then comes the symptoms, then comes the diagnosis, then comes the treatment, and then comes the actionables, what you can do. So there should be a logical flow. And just after the overview, you cannot start with the treatment or you cannot start with the diagnosis. So you have to follow a logical order. The reader can follow from the start to the finish. So it will guide the reader logically from the initial symptom to the final self-care action. Complete. Answer the questions a patient will actually have and nothing important should be left out. So whatever you feel is important, a patient should know, an anxious patient should know, or maybe an anxious patient who is doing random Google search at 11 o'clock at night. If that person is coming and reading an article on a web page, that particular person should be satisfied after reading that. So your information has to be complete. All the essential information that a person should know should be included in your article. It should be courteous. Use a very supportive voice that encourages the patient during their recovery. So there should be no negative associations at all in your article or whatever you're presenting. So it has to be very courteous. A supportive voice that will encourage the patient during their recovery. And there are no negative associations or no negativities at all. So plain language and readability. So you should write for a 6th grade reading level. So if you're writing a patient education material, your write-up should be written, the article should be written in such a way that even a 5th or a 6th grade student is able to understand from your write-up. So reading level recommended by the AMA, NIH and AHRQ for patient education material is 5th to 6th grade. But most published patient education materials are written at a 10th to 12th grade level. So years above that, what patients can comfortably read. And patients are not very comfortable with high standard of medical information. So what you can do is we can use everyday words like high blood pressure, high blood sugar, not hypertension or hyperglycemia. Or you can define the term in the first line. Even if you're using it, even if you're using hypertension or hyperglycemia, you can define the term for the first time in your sentence. Now, when I tell you that you have to write it in like a 5th to 6th standard reading level, that doesn't mean that you will oversimplify or dilute the medical condition. For example, if I talk about anaphylaxis, it is a severe allergic reaction which is life threatening. So if you write it as, if you want to simplify and write it as it is a bad allergic reaction, then obviously that is not going to be acceptable, because a bad allergic reaction, it completely dilutes the emergency of an anaphylactic situation, right? And anaphylaxis requires immediate action. So if you're writing it that way, that actually jeopardizes the motive of patient education material. So oversimplification is not required, but yes, you should keep in mind that it is readable. Write short sentences. Aim for 15 to 20 words. One instruction per sentence to avoid confusion. Use active voice and you. Take this pill with food. Instead of this medication should be taken with food. Because active voice helps patients to connect better. It helps patients to relate. So take this pill with food. You see, this sounds much better instead of this medication should be taken with food. Now, chunk with headers. Break long content into small labeled sections readers can scan. And check with the tool. Test drafts with CDS, CDC's Clear Communication Index, or there are various tools like Hemingway. In the era of AI, you have Hemingway, which gives you a proper access. You can check the readability. How is your readability? So, using simple everyday language with visuals helps convey the message better, and it always helps patients grasp information quickly. Now, a picture can close the literacy gap. So, a picture, for example,
Oh, ma'am, you are on mute.
hello.
Yes, ma'am. Now it is audible.
Okay, okay. So all these while I was on mute, or just 1 2 seconds back I was on mute.
No, ma'am. You were not audible since last 30 seconds only.
Okay, okay. So what you don't have to do is, you don't have to add any decorative photos that don't teach anything. Separate an image from its caption or instruction. Use complex, realistic, or overly detailed anatomy art. Not required for patient education material, because that actually complicates things. Because patients, they're always in search of simple material which is easy to understand. And don't rely on visuals alone without a plain language caption. So if you're not captionating your images, then it is no point providing it in the article, because a well captionated image is always welcome over a non captionated one. Okay. So this is just an example that I'm showing here. You see how beautifully this infographic has been designed. So it's a good example of visual that you can use to help patients learn. So this is about angina. So when to be concerned. So everything, this infographic covers everything about chest pain, how it feels, what are the symptoms, and what it is actually. It's not a symptom. It's a symptom and not a disease. How it feels and what are the different types of angina. You see, what is stable angina? What is unstable angina? Their symptoms, their possible triggers, treatment, everything at one place. So this is how an infographic should look like. You see, the diagrams are quite relevant, not very heavy medical diagrams, but yet they are very connecting. they will help patients to connect. So this is just an example to make you understand that how an infographic works. Okay. So same facts with very different reader experience. You see, I'll just give you two extracts here, which is a non-edited one and the other one is an edited one, which is before and after. So before one is a clinical heavy medical jargon one and the after one is a plain language patient education material. So just see, before one, hypertension is a chronic cardiovascular condition which is characterized by persistently elevated arterial blood pressure, typically greater than equal to 130 by 180 millimeter mercury. Antihypertensive pharmacotherapy should be administered as prescribed. Uncontrolled hypertension is associated with increased risk of myocardial infarction, cerebrovascular accident, and renal impairment. Patients are advised to monitor blood pressure at regular intervals and to consult their physician regarding any therapeutic modifications. So throughout, what is being used here, we just see passive voice is used throughout, undefined medical jargon. Who knows what is antihypertensive pharmacotherapy? A layman coming and reading this for the first time will understand nothing. What is antihypertensive pharmacotherapy? What is cerebrovascular accident? What is myocardial infarction? This goes tangentially above the head, so it makes no sense basically as is there any issue? Hello?
No,
No,
ma'am,
ma'am.
you can carry on.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am, you can carry on.
No issue, ma'am.
Oh. So it is passive voice throughout, undefined medical jargon, and no clear action setup. The patient does not know what to get after reading this, what to get. What is the actionable point here? What will you do after reading this? You will just come and read and go without getting it registered in your mind. It's a 11th grade reading level. Now the after one, which is a plain language summary. Now understanding high blood pressure. High blood pressure, in the bracket you can mention that it is hypertension. The scientific term for it is hypertension, means blood is pushing too hard against your artery walls. Quite easy to understand. What to do: take your blood pressure medicine every day, even when you feel fine. Check your blood pressure at home each week and write it down for your reference. Eat less salty food. Call your doctor if your top number is 140 or higher, or if you get a bad headache, chest pain, or feel dizzy. So the entire thing is written in active voice, everyday words. Every day we are used to hearing this hyper blood pressure medicine, high blood pressure, and you will always see people, suggesting that eat less salt if you're suffering from high blood pressure. So these are like very everyday common things that we hear. Numbered specific action steps. So bullet, the action steps are provided in bullets. Clear warning signs to call out. So when you should seek medical help, even that is mentioned here. It's a 5th grade reading level. So you understand the difference between a 11th grade reading level and a 5th grade reading level. What is clinically heavy medical jargon placed in a scientific writing, and what is a plain language summary for a patient education material. So this is the difference. The more you write in active voice, the more you're able to connect with your patient better. Okay, this is another example, and maybe I have taken this from a question that one of you must have asked. How do you decide how much colloquial terminologies should be used in patient education material, and when to keep it strictly medical terminology based? A very important question. You see, a complex medical jargon. Your myocardial infarction was caused by a total occlusion of the left anterior descending artery. We performed a percutaneous coronary intervention with a drug-eluting stent. Now, as I told you, you cannot oversimplify it. What oversimplification means, you had a heart attack because of a blocked pipe. We fixed it with a metal tube, so you are cured and do not need to worry. This is absolutely an oversimplification, and this oversimplification is highly dangerous. What a balanced plain language summary tells you: you had a heart attack, This happens when a blood vessel carrying oxygen to your heart gets blocked. Doctors opened the blocked vessel using a small tube called a stent. To keep your heart healthy now, you must take your new medicines and eat heart-healthy foods. So just look into the difference. A complex medical jargon where you do not understand anything, an oversimplified version where you understand everything but you do not know what to do, what exactly to do to keep you healthy. But in a balanced, plain language summary, you have everything. No medical jargons, you understand each and every point here, and you also know what actions you're supposed to take. What are your actions to keep your heart healthy now? You must take your new medicines and you should eat heart healthy foods. Okay. So how your medical writing career path should look like. So this is a schematic representation. If you are a novice, if you're just beginning with your medical writing career path, so how your path should look like. First thing is that you have to explore your options. You have to explore your options based on your strength, based on your background. As I told you, there are different avenues open for you as a medical writer. You can be a regulatory writer, you can be a scientific content writer, healthcare content writer, scientific writer, grant writing. So there are many avenues. So you yourself have to understand what attracts you. You have to explore your options. You have to understand the different types and choose the path that fits your skills, your background, and your interests. Then practice consistently. Now, medical writing requires practice. You may learn from a course, you can learn from a theoretical course. The theoretical knowledge you can gain from a course, but the more you practice, the more consistent you become. Read, write, and research regularly. The consistent practice turns knowledge into skill and builds your confidence. So the moment you start practicing consistently, you are very close to building your portfolios. Build your portfolio across diverse fields. Select your best work samples and organize them into a portfolio that showcases your expertise and your value. Now, showcase your work, share your portfolio on LinkedIn. You can share your portfolio on LinkedIn and connect with professionals. Let your work speak for you. Then succeed and grow. Keep learning, take on new challenges, and keep improving. Growth today leads to greater opportunities tomorrow. So if you're really into it, if you really want to be into this field of medical writings, you have to learn. You really have to keep learning. You need to first select your strength, your background. Then you have to practice consistently. With practice, you will develop confidence to build your own portfolios, showcase your portfolios. You can, email to the medical communication organizations. You can mail to the giant pharmaceuticals like Cipla, GSK. They keep hiring medical writers. So after which, if they have or if they have any opening, they will surely contact you. So that is how you succeed and grow in this field. Okay. So as we come to the conclusion of this session, so we'll just have a look at the key takeaways of today's session. So it is always for patient education material, it is always patients first, always. A patient education material only succeeds if the patient understands and acts on it, not if it sounds impressive. You're using bombastic words, you're using a lot of medical jargons, you're decorating it, you're putting in it a lot of effort, a lot of content in it, but then a patient does not understand it at all. This jeopardizes all your effort. So a patient education material will only succeed if the patient understands that and acts on it. There has to be a proper call to action. You should always aim for grade 5 to 6, right? Then simplify again. Test with the readability tool before you publish. So you test with the readability tool. As I mentioned, Hemingway is a very good readability tool. It's in this era of AI. There are Grammarly, Hemingway. These readability tools are really helpful. You can check whether your content is how well readable is your content. Structure builds trust, clear title, purpose, chunked body. visuals, action steps, summary every time. So a very well built structure will always increase the engagement of the text. Run the 7C's check, as I mentioned, the 7C. So run the 7C check if your article is clear, if it's concise, if it's concrete, if it's correct, if it's coherent, complete, courteous before you are ready for publishing it. So design is communication. So white space, contrast and well placed visuals do real comprehension work. So how you're formatting it, how you're designing it for before final submission, that really speaks a lot. And confirm your understanding. Wherever possible, use teach back, ask patients to explain the material in their own words, if it is possible at all. If patients, uh, if you at all get connected with the patient, so you may ask the patient to, teach back or explain that whatever they have read to explain you back in their own words. So it is just a confirmation check whether the patient have understood the content that you have provided or not. Okay, so this brings us to the very end of the session today. So we'll just move. If you have any questions pertaining to this, you may ask.
Yeah, I have like what stage we can use like AI?
Sorry, can you come again?
At what stage of article writing we can use AI?
Yeah, this is to be kept in mind. Like if you're using an AI, like the Claude, Perplexity for your medical writing, it should be used only for drafting your article, and it should be used as an assistance. It should not be used as a deliverable. Only for drafting your article, if you want to draft your article, if you want a clear structure, you can use that. And since there is there are a lot of emerging AI apps, so for literature review and all that, you can use your AI, but that has to be critically. Again, you have to verify it that whether it is authentic or not before you are actually deliberating it. So we have a question here. What portfolio should a beginner prepare before applying for medical writing jobs? Yes. Portfolio, as far as portfolio is concerned, I told you that you can begin with uh, disease, with any kind of disease, a condition, medical condition. You can begin with a medical condition. You can begin with patient leaflets. Then you can select a paper. You can summarize, write their abstract or manuscript writing. So maybe create a portfolio that is diverse and something not of same kind. Maybe medical condition, do not build it 2 3 4 medical condition and you do not club it into one and provide it. What you can do is prepare one medical condition, one for manuscript writing, maybe your manuscript, take a paper and write an abstract for the same. Then a leaflet, a drug monograph. Okay, and yes, that will, I think, it is good to begin with. So you can actually begin with patient education material, since patient education material is very simple, and the regulatory writings and all that, that requires a little technical knowledge. You need to be well acquainted with the US FDA guidelines, ICH, GCP guidelines, and all that. So for that, a patient education material of different kind is good enough to build your portfolio. Yes. Top companies and organizations which hire medical writers. Yes. So Sanofi, GSK, and there are now that different hospitals. Like I said that I was working with In Science Health. It is a consultancy basically. The hospitals and all. What they do is they take help from agencies or consultancies basically. They give the project. So where I was working for In Science Health, so there I received a project, a hospital project. I was responsible for designing the web page of not designing, like putting in the content for the disease page from A to Z, whatever diseases were there. So I used to write about those diseases. Sorry. So what is the role of Form D in medical writing? For Form D in medical writing, you can always look into regulatory writing, clinical regulatory writing, for grant writing and all that. Form D is from people who are Form D can well get connected with those form of medical writing. As per my concept, medical writer does not need for any overseas course of 9 months. Actually, medical writing, as I mentioned, that it is not a skill that it is a course will only guide you. You of course need a course, but that course will only guide you. The skill you need to build up on your own. Medical writing skill you need to build up on your own. And how you can build it up? By reading different articles, writing. You can just select on paper, you can start writing an abstract of the paper. The more you write, the more you become consistent in what you do. Would you recommend any websites, books, or courses for learning patient education writing? Yeah, Clinorix itself will have a patient education, writing course. So maybe shortly that will be launched. So you can follow that, and also websites like Coursera, Write Clinic, Health Writers Hub. I think these are going to help you. And if you're looking for books or courses, you can also opt for Symbiosis distance course, certificate in medical writing. They will provide you the books and everything. That's a detailed course of 6 months where you also have exam and assignments and everything. How should I start medical writing? Can you tell me step by step? I think I already covered that in a roadmap. I already showed the roadmap. I recently prepared an article, but I'm not sure how to reduce the plagiarism score to below 10%. Could you please guide me on how to do it? So yeah, plagiarism, if it's below, yes, you can change the wordings and see, like wherever you, I mean, the plagiarized words and or they highlight, like if you're using dupli checker and all, they highlight the plagiarized words and all. So you can just change the terms, and you can see if it gets reduced. Canva AI, you can use Canva AI for creating infographics, images, and icons. Achha, where can we see your articles for the reference purpose? Yes, there are different sites, like I will tell you 2-3 sites: Med Report Foundation, Med India, and Medium. You can create your account and you can publish daily. What they will do is they have got a different set of editors there. If your writing is at all selected, the editors will go through your writing. If they select your writing, then your writing will be published in the paper. So paper means in their website, sorry, not paper, in their website. Med India, Med Report Foundation. For Med Report Foundation, you have to apply. Okay, they will screen your CV and portfolios, after which they will get back to you. So they demand basically one article per month. Yeah. So yeah, so you want to see my articles for your reference. So maybe I have. Uh, So yes, you can contact with Khushi once. I can share the link of my papers, and maybe she can help you with that. So I hope there are no more questions for today. I hope it was a good learning experience for all of you. I hope at least some valuable insights you have gained from this session. So it was.
If
Just a
anyone
second.
has any question, they can ask in the chat box. So with this, we come to the end of our session. Thank you so much,
So I'll
ma'am.
just give one, just a second. I'll just give one reference link and maybe an article that I've written. And this
Sure,
is
ma'am.
not for
Sure,
a
ma'am.
patient. Yeah, yeah. I just given an article. So I've just shared the link, and this is reminded. This is not a patient education material. This is for scientific publication. That is, this falls under a different section. Okay. So if you're done, then we can. Main skills I think I've covered. So you have to start practicing how to write in plain language first. Your plain language summaries are more important. You have to focus on that first. Then you have to create your portfolios. Then you have to know how to use AI judiciously, and not there are many beginner medical writers. They will completely draft the content from the AI, and they will just publish that same. And your AI assistants, that your AI should act as an assistant and not as your deliverable. And also the like you have to your scientific literacy also matters equally. You have to get acquainted with the scientific terms, what it means, and everything. You have to abide by the style, the different referencing styles, and all that. Everything you have to keep in mind while writing. So, Kushi, I think if no one is having any other questions, then we can just move forward.
Okay, ma'am. I think we have one question in the chat box,
Hmm.
which asks, just a minute. Okay, ma'am. The question is, as per my consent, medical writer does not need for any overseas course of 9 months. Is that true?
I answered that. I answered that.
Okay, okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so with this, I think will conclude this session. So thank you so much, ma'am, for delivering such an informative and insightful session. We truly
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank
your
you so
time and valuable knowledge you have shared with us today. I would also like to thank all our participants. Before we conclude, I would like to remind everyone that feedback form will be shared in the chat box. Please complete it as it is mandatory for receiving your certificate. On behalf of Clinorix team, thank you once again for being a part of today's session. We hope to see you again in our upcoming webinars and learning events. Have a wonderful evening. Kindly note that this feedback form will not be shared after the meeting has been ended. So we request you all to fill this feedback form.